Welcome to Reasonably Ad Lib. In this show, we de-snob classical music.
And take it out of the tuxedo.
I'm Kevin.
And I'm Carlos.
Hey, Carlos. We're back.
Hey, Kevin, we are back.
This is the third taping of Reasonably Ad Lib. We are... the last time we left off with... We're talking about why classical music is boring, right? So,
boring. And we talked about some contemporary music that was boring, too.
Yeah, so I think we're going to pick that up a little bit and get a little bit organized. Last time, we were just throwing some ideas around. But I think the next couple of shows, next series of shows, we can kind of really break it down and talk about the little topics within this whole bigger topic of why classical music is boring, that we can start organizing, and I guess then we'll have a better chance of picking this whole apart, because I've talked to a lot of friends about this in recent weeks, because we have been doing this. And we are thinking about, this why classical music is this boring thing. And a lot of friends give me a lot of good ideas. But a lot of them are actually, a lot of them are kind of freaked out, because every one of us understand that this is a really complicated topic to pick apart, because it has everything to do with human emotions. It has everything to do with perception. It has everything to do with... It is not something that you can quantify and put it in a bottle tells everybody this is green.
It is extremely subjective, and also a lot of your friends are classically trained musicians.
They are.
And a lot of my friends are non-classically trained musicians, but musicians nonetheless. So I think we've got a rich base to mine here to talk about perception and interpretation in terms of what's boring and what's exciting.
Yeah, a lot of friends also says, "Well, are you guys insane? You're gonna pick this topic to start with the show with?" But I guess it's okay. It's okay.
Yeah, I almost feel like we are daring to even question the notion of, does the emperor have any clothes? Because of, this idea of classical music that's been around so long and has got such a status to it. I mean, even people that don't like it or don't know it say, well, but that's classical. I mean, that's Bach and Beethoven and Mozart, and how can you dare even who do you think you are? Yeah. And I think that some people would back away from that, but not us. We are going into it
head on.
The bone in our teeth, right into the wind.
And I guess a lot of times it's easier to praise than to criticize, right? So we're going down the criticism road right here.
Well, we should clarify this, I think, Kevin. When we talk about criticism, we're talking about analysis, which for me as a musician is something that makes music fascinating, is being able to talk about it and hold it up and turn it around to different angles and look at it and shine different lights on it and get different ideas about it in order to make it richer, because it's so dense and so rich. That's one way of appreciating its richness. Yeah. Whereas if you just stand back and say, "Ooh, Beethoven, it's like being in church. We can't do any. Just don't talk about it. No, I don't want to talk about it. Just listen. It's just Beethoven. That's all." I mean, that's one way to appreciate any kind of art form. But another way is to really pick it apart and look at it, all the component parts, and appreciate it for its majesty and its complexity. And I think that's what we're doing.
The more you love it, the more you know it, the more you love it. Right?
And that's what we're doing. So This is constructive analytical criticism we're doing here.
Yeah. Okay, so there are three things that, over the past week, there are three things that I think we can talk about as individual topics. There is, in terms of musical elements and why it is boring. How about the musical ingredient that is involved here? The other topic I can think about is perception of the music. Now, that is actually the most complicated part of it, because
that's the subjective part. Yeah,
and we're going to explore that in the upcoming show. And there's also and we touched on this last time a little bit, the interpretation of it. Sometimes the musical ingredient is not the source of the boredom. Sometimes the interpretation of it is the problem itself. So that is going to be down the road, maybe a couple of shows down the road. And the interpretation part of it is interesting, because we have to play a lot of musical examples, because each piece of music we probably have to bring in 2 or 3 examples to talk about why this interpretation is not as good as the other one, etc., etc. So today, let's talk about ingredients, ingredients a little bit of music. Now, there are a lot of when we talk about a lot of times when we talk about music. What really is music? Music, to me at least, is a timeline. Is when I do private teaching, when I talk to the students about music, when they see a piece of music on paper, I always ask them, okay, what are you looking at here? What are you looking at? And a lot of them will throw in, different ideas. But to me, when you look at a piece of music, the lines, the staff, and the dots on the page, you're looking at the timeline. You're looking at a timeline. You're looking at what you're going to do in the next 5 to 10 minutes. Or, if it's a piece of short piece of music, the next 2 minutes. So you're looking at a timeline. So what basically is happening when you look at a piece of music or when you play a piece of music and you're laying out what you're going to do in the next several minutes, right? And within that several minutes, the stuff that you throw in there, the stuff that the composer says it needs to happen in the next few minutes, those are the ingredients. And what are we talking about? We're talking about pitch. We're talking about rhythm. We're talking about dynamics. We're talking about articulation, all kinds of musical stuff. Now, for the classical guys, a lot of times we play, we basically do an interpretation of what's written on the page.
The classical guys. I love that. I imagine this gang of thuggy-looking people sitting around in a bar smoking cigarettes and maybe doing some illicit gambling.
Well,
the classical guys.
Yeah, you hope cigarette is, only it, right?
Yeah.
But we are... this is a funny thing to talk about because for classical musicians, a lot of times we play, in terms of the ingredients, we play exactly what's on the page. We're not, I would say the word allowed to do to do too much outside of what's written. Like a Bach, when we play a Bach fugue on paper, we're not allowed to do a lot of, we're not allowed to get too creative in terms of the notes. We play what's on the page. I have seen, we can't just throw 2 or 3 measures of improvised stuff into when we're playing a Bach fugue, right? I've seen people do it, but just for fun or at a concert that, they just intend to be fun. But, if you're doing a graduate level recital, they're going to fail you if you do that. Right?
And I've noticed that in a lot of higher level music, the interpretation marks and things like that are really carefully prescribed, and they really, really want you to do things in certain ways. So whoever transcribed that, whoever did their research says, yes, it is pretty much this way. And it feels really limiting. Yeah. So I know what you mean, that there's not room for personal interpretation. There's room for lots of interpretation, but it's according to carefully. But I think you're talking more about, right now we're just talking about the main ingredients of music.
Yeah. The notes on the page, basically.
Yeah.
So now let's play a musical example. This is a lot of people would regard when they think about classical music right away that, well, it seems like we pick on Mozart a lot, but I guess he can take it, right? He's the big cheese, right? So he can take it. So a lot of times when we talk about classical music, bang, Mozart is the guy. So let's play a thing by Mozart. I'm going to pipe this up a little bit here. Okay, this is Piano Concerto number 11 in F, Kershaw 413. This is the first.
It's pleasant. It's nice.
It's
nice.
Yeah.
It's nice.
It's not offensive, right? Shift into the other thing. A lot of repetition, right? Yeah. But nothing that you would not expect from a Mozart thing. And
And when I hear stuff like this, I try and wrap my head around the fact that at the time, this may well have been more groundbreaking then and very modern and edgy sounding to the audience of that day than it does to us, in part because Mozart wrote this stuff, it was copied, it was learned from, and that eventually filtered down to our musical understanding today. So right now, this sounds really incredibly cliche because it defined the clichéness.
It got exploited to the bitter end, all through the past 200 years, right? There's already a possibility that just popped in my head is that, when he was alive, he was writing this for a very specific audience, right? And the audience actually would expect certain things from him. If he just go totally wacko on things, which I'm pretty sure he wanted to, from all we know, Mozart is actually a pretty wacky guy, right? But he can't just write something totally crazy, which he is totally capable of, like the Dissonance Quartet, right? The first section of that is just totally insane.
And a musical joke, the concerto that he really played with ideas and expectations.
Yeah, but he even if he wants to write something totally out of norm, he probably couldn't do it at the time. So I would say that he default to what he does best here, as in everything's pretty proper. There's nothing very offensive here and there, and none of the tonality is out of whack. It's everything is expected.
Mm-hmm.
Now, is the let's listen to it a little bit more. Now, there's the introduction part of it, and then the piano will play something solo, and then the orchestra will answer.
Call and response. Call and response. And, it makes me wonder at the time if that call and response thing wasn't a sort of an innovative deal. I know it was popular in maybe Baroque music, but I think he was exploiting it somewhat and sort of bringing the two in together at the same time. Theme development, things like that. So to us, this sounds expected and really regular, and sort of almost like color in the lines kind of music. And I get that.
It's not offensive in any way.
No.
But then to us, wouldn't that be kind of boring if it's not offensive? If everything is easy listening, it's like radio station that plays soft rock all the time. It's not. It's just on the background when you're driving. It's not gonna. It's not going to, to be a serious problem for anybody. Right. Isn't that kind of boring to us?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, we'll pipe this up a little bit more.
A little bit of tension there with the minor chords and maybe a sense of diminished scale there to lead us from one part to another.
Slide into this different section there.
Yeah.
So, to me, I'm going to become the troublemaker and say, to me, this could be kind of boring, because at least to us, right? Because everything is expected, like we said before. But yeah, see, your mind would go blind. It would go blank when you just listen to this all day, right? I guess that's why a lot of classical music station would pick something like this to play all day, because it's not offensive to anyone, right?
Now, this leads us into one of the other things we talked about is the perception.
Yeah.
That I think for a lot of people, for them, music, they like the regularity and they like the, I don't want to say boringness, but they like knowing what to expect. For them, they like the order of it in their brain. They like hearing it. They like being walked through step by step. And that is something that's very gratifying to them.
Okay.
And I know I like that about some music. I like the regular, I can anticipate what's going to happen. Nothing terribly surprising. And there's some music that I like that about.
Okay. Let's try this. Let's try another Mozart piece. And I'm going to cue it up. Okay, wait a minute. Let's stop right there. Right away, right? For this one is already there is something more interesting happening, right? There's a growth. There's obvious growth there. I know it's frustrating to stop the recording like, 4 measures in, right? But there's already a growth, more interesting direction that seems to try to take the listener to another place. And I don't know if you can hear it, but there's a really Baroque sounding the thing going on here. You know, it's almost on the background. Let's listen to it one more time. On the background, it's almost kind of like a chorale going on. I don't know if you would agree with that. Let's listen to it one more time. But this time I'm not going to stop the recording. Yeah, isn't that interesting?
That sounds much more modern to my ears. The background pattern.
I think the other thing that make this interesting is, you know, there's an ongoing motif going on.
It seems like there are more sort of dynamics going on.
Yeah.
Too.
Okay. Well, let's do this. I'm sorry. Let's start this piece one more time. I want everybody to listen to this loud. You hear that? And it's one of these motifs that it can grow in terms of taking it to another level. Here it goes again. And then I think one of the things why I think this is more interesting is because of that little motif that has room to grow. The listeners were starting to think, okay, what is the next step? Where are we going with this? And then that's where the interest is.
It's not, you know, the other one, by contrast, the one we heard earlier, is something like, oh, we set out a little thing and it resolves.
Nice.
A little thing resolves, little thing resolves. This seems to have more of a longer term direction.
Yeah.
And to my ears, this sounds almost like getting into Beethoven land.
Yeah. And, you know, the other thing, too, is, well, you can say I cheated a little bit, but this recording is actually done on period instruments. So the strings sounds a little bit different than it's a little bit softer, it's a little bit closer to the Baroque sound. And I think that's maybe one of the reasons why the opening 8 or 10 measures or so has kind of a Baroque feel. The little, I would say, a ghostly image start floating into the foreground.
So here's an interesting question, Kevin. Would this feel differently if it were played on modern instruments?
You know, that's kind of one of these things that we might want to talk about in a later show, because that has everything to do with the next couple of topics that we're talking about: interpretation, and you know how during a performance or during a recording, how they actually set up the performance itself. I mean, part of it, of course, is do we use instruments, period instruments, or do we use instruments that are available today? And I think for pieces like this, they were written 200 or 300 years ago, it does make a difference, because if it's a different, there's no good or bad.
Musical ethics.
Yeah.
Well, no, it's something to ponder. It really is, because it begs the question, the very hypothetical question: if Mozart had access to this, to modern instruments, to our contemporary instruments back then, would he have written the exact same thing, or would he have written something a little bit differently?
Yeah, that's true. That's true, because a long while ago, I was in a graduate seminar, and what I remember was the difference between a modern piano and a forte piano, which is a piano that was around during Beethoven's time. And there are certain, I remember that the professor was demonstrating the playing with us. It's one of the, I'm sorry, I forgot which Beethoven piano sonata it was, but there is a octave glissando that, you know, you play an octave on a piano and you just glide your hand up.
Yeah.
and fingernails will come off in a modern piano, right? But he was playing a forte piano, an older piano, older style piano, and the glide just go right through. So, of course, there are practical concerns of that. But the forte piano, it sounds, I would say, softer and more mellow than modern piano. Modern piano you can hear the hammer on the back sometimes. So, and I believe the forte piano is still I forgot. I need to check into this, but it's either still a plucking instrument or the mallet that hit the string is a little bit softer. So there is, other than the practical concern, how some of the writings seems to be kind of hard to do or impossible on a modern piano because it was written for a period instrument. Mm-hmm. And the flip side of that, of course, is does it sound different at all? Is there any because the composer was not intended to write that music for modern piano, so that kind of stuff. So for this Mozart piece, I think it's not really a matter of right or wrong. I think it's not even a matter of good or bad, but I'm not. Sometimes I would really prefer for Mozart pieces, I would really prefer a smaller orchestra with period instruments with a softer, more mellow sound, more ghostly sound, I would say, than if you slam a Mahler or a Wagner sound, that kind of sound, to play a Mozart symphony. Sometimes
maybe there's a subtlety in what Mozart was doing that is totally lost when you play it with more modern instruments, with those kind of heavy, like you said, Mahler dynamics, where everything is really, really clear. It's kind of like dun dun da da, it's here or it's there.
Yeah.
But maybe there's something much subtler with I like what you said, the ghostly sound. That's kind of what I think of when I hear those strings. It sounds a little thinner. It sounds a little bit
more subtle.
It's more subtle, and maybe Mozart was playing with some of those subtleties with those early instruments that we don't have access to in our heads anymore.
Yeah.
Because I think people hear early instruments and they think, well, that's before they developed the bracing and the steel strings and all this stuff. And of course, now it's much better to have things that have more of a statement, and it's tuned up to A440 instead of A3. What was it? It's a little bit lower back then. But maybe maybe Mozart just really, really played with some of those the subtleties of the period instruments and got something out of it. Tell me, people must have done this. They must have worked with this. They must have said, if we do this with the period instruments, we're going to find different voices.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's a huge thing, and it's a huge argument, hopefully friendly argument within academia and the musicology. Should we do this or should we do that? I think a lot of times, if you're dealing with even a lot of professional settings, especially when you're dealing with a community orchestra, it's just impossible to use period instruments, right? You can. It's a lot of money. But
they're very delicate. They're extremely hyper responsive to temperature and humidity.
Yeah,
all kinds of things.
Yeah,
especially if you're talking about things like gut strings.
Oh yeah. Do you want to listen to that Mozart piece a little bit more?
Yeah, let's listen. And for you listeners out there, I want you to listen to what Kevin's talking about with this ghostly sound. It's subtler.
Yeah. It's not as in your face. Yeah, it's not as in your face, right? See? Oh, yeah,
yes.
Right there.
Yeah. Yep, I hear it.
It's wonderful. Yeah, and everything is nice, right?
The whole thing is a little lighter and a little bit bouncier.
And even the contrast. Now, I'm sure if they go all out and use period instruments, I'm sure the horns are also natural horns, not the modern horns. And the contrast between the wind and the brass, I think in this case French horns is kind of the wind section too. The the contrast between the wind and the string section. That's when you use period instruments like this, the balance is, I think, much easier to achieve than you have to worry about, okay, well, this section is going to totally overblown the other section. So I would say, in terms of, back to the big topic of the boredom in classical music, I think, now we played 2 Mozart pieces today, right? And I think this one, by the way, is the Symphony Number 29, first movement, Symphony Number 29 in A, first movement, K201. And I think 29 it's quite popular, but it's not one of the big ones. It's not the Jupiter or 4041. So, but yeah, this one is worth seeking out. And on this, so this symphony, if we play them side by side, it's definitely, if you ask me, a lot more interesting and a lot less boring than the other one.
And it's like, it's to me, it's as though my attention span is increased in time when I listen to the second one, the one we just heard, as opposed to the first one. The first one is little blips and little phrases that do a lot of repetition. But this one it seems to grow more and seems to refer back to itself in sort of oblique ways. And so my attention on this one is, it's more interesting because there's sort of more of a longer term thing that's going on.
Yeah. Well, then I'm going to say something that would defeat our whole discussion. How about? If somebody want to say, well, that's not fair to Mozart or anybody else because, well, your boring example is a piano concerto, but your interesting example is a symphony that is played with period instruments. Well, that's not fair because you're comparing apples and oranges here. I don't. Well, because for a concerto, it's you have a soloist, you have different concerns, the goal is different. Versus a symphony, you're basically not really featuring anybody in particular in normal circumstance, right? So I don't know if we actually see what I just said. Just kind of open another bucket of worms onto this whole discussion, wouldn't it? But I think when we're just talking about basic ingredients, I think we sort of still have a point here because the first piece wasn't as, in terms of the growth, in terms of how the expectation is being set up, it's not as energetic or dynamic as the symphony. Right?
And it doesn't give as much in the long run either.
Yeah.
So I mean, I remember the first one. The first few times you hear some of the phrases, it's kind of like, well, they're coming along again. Here we go. I know this already. Oh, yeah. This one, it grew a little bit.
Yeah, it does. And plus the motif
and that
really helps.
And that has to do with the sense of what we're talking about. Is what separates boring classical music from interesting classical music.
Yeah, and we're going to explore some more with this, but I think it's really hard as when we plan the show and when we start talking along, we laid out 3 topics, right? 3 separate topics, and as this actually goes along, we're figuring out that it's really hard to talk about all 3 at the same time. So I think this is, I don't know about you, but I think this is a pretty interesting discussion. And I think the next couple of times we're going to dig more into interpretation and maybe also expectation a little bit. But I think interpretation would be very interesting to do because, hey, maybe next time what we can do is I will find, I'm sure I have one around, I'll find a recording of the 29th with modern instrument and the 29th with this recording.
That would be great. I was just thinking of that. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we could have the same piece played on modern instruments compared to period instruments?
Yeah, and also for more modern piece that is like a Shostakovich or Vaughan Williams, we can find recordings with, and we did it once before, but we're going to really dig into it to find different recordings by different orchestras and conductors. I know we the clock is ticking here, but let me throw out one thing. Let's see, another tangent, the tangent alert. We should have a bell on the background. Okay, so I'm just thinking, there's a little thought that comes up in my head. When we were talking about using modern instruments to play older pieces, And I said, well, if you use a Wagner or a Mahler kind of sound to apply to a Mozart symphony, sometimes it may not work that well, or it might create some kind of little weirdness here and there. Is it possible that when we think a modern sound, we have a certain expectation in mind, as in a Mahler symphony, in a Wagner opera, string sections. On the flip side of it, you also have a wind section that can screams a little bit, and have a brass section that totally kicks ass. Right?
Yes.
So if you use that sound to play, use that string sound to play a Mozart symphony, which really only has a very limited amount of strings compared to, the Mahler orchestra. If you use that string sounds to play a Mozart piece, then your head would be thinking like, okay, what? And those Mozart symphonies, and we're talking about maybe 8 or 10 woodwind player or horn player. Well, that's it. There is no the other side. Nobody's playing against. There's not an offensive line that play against the string.
Oh, sports analogies in classical music. Here we go.
Yeah.
We have fallen off the
You know
deep
what I'm
end.
saying? You know what I'm saying, though? Because
Yes.
when we hear that string, automatically we think, okay, somewhere, somehow, there should be a big brass section coming up, but there's none. So I don't know. This is one of these things that just pop in my head, and I'm saying it for no good reason.
So go back to how you framed this. You said talking about expectations.
Yeah.
So are you saying that with something like a Mahler, we are expecting the big subway train of the horn section to come crashing in, and we don't see that with Mozart?
Yeah, if you use that string sound,
Yeah.
to play a Mozart piece,
Yeah.
something then in our head somewhere, in our subconscious somewhere, we hear something missing, which is actually not there at all. But because after so many years, we got
Because
used to
we're bringing our modern ears that have been heavily
Yeah.
influenced by people like Mahler.
yeah.
And so to us, the Mozart sounds lightweight.
Just sound kind of, to me, okay, this is just talking Kevin.
Yeah.
It sounds wrong because something is missing. So
It sounds like something is missing because we have, in the last 100 years, 150 years, developed more of an expectation for the big honking, section with French horns and trombones and the whole thing coming in.
Yeah. So all I'm trying to say is period instruments are nice. So because that's what the composer heard, way back. So, well, I think for this third taping and second official show of Reasonably Ad Lib, hopefully we brought. I don't think we have any final solutions in mind when we start doing this, because boredom in classical music, that's a huge topic, and we understand that this argument or this conversation can go on forever and ever. But hopefully we just put in our 2 cents into this, and there's no end to this. So we're quickly hitting the half-hour mark, I'm sure. So let's just end it today right here, and I think next couple of times we're gonna, like I said, we're gonna dig a lot deeper into this interpretation thing.
And I'm really looking forward to when we get into expectations, especially because something I've thought about for a long time is the fact that all music is totally abstract. It's not like other arts. Visual arts are started out as images of things that we see in real life. With the exception of a few symphonies where they have, the piccolo playing a little bird sitting on the tree or something. It's all abstract. The feelings we get from intervals, from rhythmic variations, from dynamics, all of that is abstract in our heads. Mm-hmm. There's no intrinsic value to one or the other. Mm-hmm. And therefore, everything we bring to music is based on expectations, psychological, sociological expectations.
Well, unless you're talking about really tightly programmed music. But you know what? Yeah. Let's have those worms stay in the can for today.
While. Yep.
And, I guess, talk to you next time.
Yep. Bye.
Don't go anywhere. We have a special segment with one of our panelists. Stay tuned. Hey everyone, we are back here, and I think just like the last couple of times with Gary Kennan, I think for now, since timing-wise and schedule-wise, we have some difficulty getting everybody together. So we will do these short segments with our panelists until we can work out a time for everybody to get together. So today we are lucky to have one of our panelists. She is the president of, amongst other things, she is the president of the the Northwest Mahler Festival. Is that correct? The Northwest?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, Northwest Mahler Festival, a really wonderful happening every year that they talk. So Wendy Lee is one of our panelists, and like I said, she's the president of the entire operation. So yeah, Wendy, talk a little bit about the Mahler Festival. I have the lucky enough to play with you guys only once, but we did Mahler first that year, and it was fabulous. So hey, if you don't mind talking,
we'd love to have you back, Kevin. We'd love to have you
thank
back.
you. That right now it's tougher because I just live like miles and miles away now. But
we'll get it worked out.
Okay. So yeah, if you don't mind, talk a little bit about the Mahler Festival, how it came into being, and what's involved each year, that kind of stuff.
Sure, not a problem. My pleasure. The Northwest Mahler Festival, it started back 1994, kind of as an idea that started with Joe Pollard White, who was then the conductor of Rainer Symphony. Great. And he had this idea about getting some of his friends together and just sight reading some really large works that are normally almost impossible for your regular community group to do, or even a professional group, because of the size of the added players that you need to pull it off.
Yes.
And so he got some of his friends together, and they sight read, I believe it was Mahler 1.
Wow.
And I might even be wrong on the year. I believe it was 1995. One of those friends was Dan Weiss, who is a bass player, was also a physician.
Yeah. Who
at the time was working at Fred Hutch and I believe and at Harborview. And Dan is this go-getter, like Joe White is, and Dan was like, hey, we can kind of organize this and kind of get some more people involved, and he goes, we can even do a concert. So 1996, they not only did a reading session, I believe a couple of reading sessions, and I'm looking at our history here. They did
this is way
4
back
reading
then.
Sessions.
Yeah.
They also did a concert. And at that concert, they, of course, featured Mahler 1. And from that, it was, this kind of small group of about 90 people, maybe 100. And the next year it got a little bigger.
Wow.
They did more reading sessions. The next year they did 6 reading sessions.
Wow.
And that was the first year that we had Jeffrey Simon, because that previous Christmas, one of our other founders, Robin Miller, just happened to be playing, I believe, at a Barnes & Noble at South Center with his brass group, and Jeffrey Simon happened to be in town, who's a conductor who is Australian but lives in England. Yeah. And he was there promoting his record and happened to hear the music, and he followed the sound, and they started talking, and they both found that they loved Mahler. Well, I have this little festival that's kind of, starting up. And anyway, so we had Jeffrey Simon as our conductor for about 10 years, and now we've been working with just different people, and we've been going strong for a long, long time. This is the first year we're not going to have a concert this year, but we're still doing the reading sessions and still trying to reach out there to people in the community. I guess I would say we started out as just being avocational or community players, and maybe a few semi-professional players playing together, and then it kind of evolved, and we started using professional players like from the Seattle Symphony, and believe the second year that Jeffrey Simon was our music director, and principal conductor, he had this idea of involving students. And I got this phone call from Jeffrey Simon and asking me if I had any students who maybe could handle this. And I was kind of taken aback. I was like, what?
Yeah.
Students? and this lovely idea. So this festival, it changed one more time. Because it didn't have anything about students in the original mission statement. Yeah. And he had the idea of involving, or utilizing the energy, there we go, and spirit of these young people to be a part of the festival and to try to perform with us right alongside of the adults. Yeah. Hence the idea of what we call the Mahler Munchkins. Yeah. That was the first year we had Mahler Munchkins. Yeah. And that started in 1998. And it started with my own private students. It has grown and evolved, but we welcome students from any studio, not just my own private studio. Yeah. But they brought a sense of energy and excitement. It just brought a new energy and just a new life to the festival. And so we discovered that we needed to change our mission statement to include students. And
I think that's very important. This is by the time this everybody can hear this will probably be the third or fourth taping or second or third official shows, right? So if our listeners or our friends listen to this for a couple of times, everybody know I launch into tangents. So here we go. There should be a tangent alert somewhere. No, what I was trying to say is what you said, that the Mahler Festival actually actively involved young, not necessarily young, but I'm talking about the students of music. Yes. It's very important. It's a very important thing because a lot of times kids or even adult students too, they work so hard on their craft. They are in the practice room a lot. They don't really get to experience the actual teamwork. And I'm not even just talking about the chamber works, which is easier to put together. I mean, for string players, and you're a string player and also a singer, and I'm a tuba player. So we a lot of times we got to play, small group chamber music, brass quintet or string quartets, etc. And they don't, young students, especially the younger ones, they don't, unless for some of those who participate in youth symphonies, and even youth symphony too, I mean, they don't always get to see or play in a thing that involves 80 or 90 players.
Well, and we had a group as big as 140.
Yeah. So my tangent, here we go, right here, is when I was a young student. I was has to be like 14, 15, or maybe even younger than that. I was a tuba player with the Hong Kong Youth Symphony, and it was fine. It was great. That group was fabulous. Was awesome. I think it was one of the best in Asia.
Yes.
And one concert we actually got to play with the Hong Kong Philharmonic, and I remember we did among other things the Planets. So that really, just talking about me, that really kickstart my interest in everything. Because, I mean, in the practice room or, when we were kids, we don't really practice that much. But, I just gave that away. So, that's, when you talked about, we didn't talk about this in the show prep, but when you mentioned the fact that, Mahler Festival actually actively involved, young students to do this, that's really valuable to the community.
Yeah.
So, and the other thing I want to say is, Mahler Festival is mostly, would I be wrong to say that Mahler Festival, in terms of the participation, the musicians' participation, is mostly a community happening? Would that be wrong
for the
me to say
most
that?
part? Yes.
Yeah.
For the most
So
part, yeah.
and what I remember from my experience with the festival is the quality, the level is actually very high. And hopefully nobody's offended when I say this, but the level of musicianship, whether or not is intrinsic, or whether or not is, it's everybody got so pumped up they actually because of the festival they play better because of this.
You play above yourself. You do.
Yeah.
You feel inspired. You want to work hard.
Yes.
You do. But it's just, there's something that we call the Mahler magic. And it's just this, to have 100+ people in a room with the same passion and the same vision of wanting to make these notes on a page come alive.
Yeah.
There is nothing like it. And I play, as you know, I play in a lot of groups.
Yes.
And I do a lot of professional gigs, and
sometimes you don't get the same vibe.
No, you don't. I love to play. I'm also a teacher. I love to teach. I live for my students. When I do the Mahler Festival, when we do our concerts, and we got to play at Benaroya last summer,
great.
There was just such a unified feeling of just sheer joy. And I've heard from audience members that they get that same feeling, and that's just really nice to hear that back from them.
Yeah, it's one of these things that is really hard to put on paper, or really hard to sort of quantify. Because there's a certain vibe in the room, or there's a certain spirit. And we're not talking about religious thing here, but just a certain spirit that, ears are, intonations that normally would just go haywire. When something like this is happening, the ears perked up and everybody would be, more careful in terms of intonation. There's something happening that the mix, certain things would happen that will make the overall quality of the music better.
Well, even for us as string players, we have to match strokes. We have to match bow speed. We have to match so many things.
So weird.
And when you play in the same group every week, over time, over months, you learn how to do this. We do this in basically over a 2.5 week period when we're getting ready for a concert, for example.
Yeah.
That we have to, at hyper speed, be really aware and come together and play as one. And many of us don't see each other except when we come together for the reading sessions in June and July, and for the concert when we have it in July. It's what we do in that short amount of time is just nothing short of just amazing. And when we're talking about the students, there's a record, and I'm really proud of this record because it comes out of my studio. The youngest participants in the Mahler Festival were kids we've had them as young as 6th graders. And they're obviously kids that started playing when they were pretty young.
Wow.
But, we had an 11-year-old, I think he was 11 years, and first one we had was 11 years and 7 or 8 months old when we played. And she was one of the first Mahler Munchkins. And then she went on, when she was in high school, was in all-state, all-Northwest orchestra, and was one of the top players. That was kind of really cool to see that. But the Mahler Festival helped her realize what she could do. And then we had another one come along when we did Mahler 8 that broke that record.
Yeah.
And it was 11 years and like 4 months old.
That is awesome. I mean, it's
And-
Mahler Munchkins.
Mahler Munchkins,
think
yeah.
that's
And the
really-
Mahler Munchkins are small. They're small and they're big.
Yeah.
It's just a term that we use, and you would think that a teenager wouldn't want to be called a Munchkin, and they wear that with pride
Yeah.
to say I was a Mahler Munchkin or I am a Mahler Munchkin, but to have no other festival in the entire world unites students, avocational players, amateurs, adults that haven't played that long, as you were mentioning, professional, semi-professional. No other festival in the entire world brings all of those elements together and has them work as one unit.
Fabulous. Yeah.
And it's if you can't tell, I'm really proud of it.
No, yes, I can tell. I mean, and it's a great happening because I've seen it. Hey, Wendy, talk a little bit about in terms of calendar. What would happen typically in a cycle in a year? A cycle as in in a year.
The festival year. Well,
Yeah.
generally, we have reading sessions,
Yeah.
which occur in June and July. And they're open to any musician that wants to come that plays an instrument that we would use in a traditional large orchestra.
Yeah.
Although sometimes we've had banjo. No, pardon me, not banjo. We've had guitars, we've had lutes.
It's atypical orchestral, the instruments that usually you would think of as orchestral, combined with orchestral experience, right? It's like, banjo.
Yeah. You also on occasion utilize saxophones.
Yeah.
So it says anybody that plays any of that, percussion, strings, brass, woodwinds, can sign up and come to a reading session. We have different conductors that most of the time are local conductors that you would see leading different community groups. Mm-hmm. And you would sight read a major work that, as I said before, would normally be difficult for your average group to do because of the sheer number of players that you need. It's just above budgets.
Yeah.
And budget is a word that's really important, especially these days with our funding, with everybody having funding issues. And you come in, and if you're a wind or brass player, you sit down in your instrument. You actually rotate which part you play. So it isn't like you come in, you sit down, okay, I'm playing, there's one person on first, one person on second, like that. No, you may have...
Compete for chairs, yeah.
There's no fight for chairs. You may have 4 or 5 people playing the first part. You may have 4 or 5 playing the second part. There have been reading sessions where we've literally had 18 horn players.
Yeah.
And then each movement, you have to stop because they rotate who's playing what parts. They have to stand up and they have to move around.
Yeah.
We call it the Mahler do-si-do. and you might see 12 clarinets. You might see, I think one reading session we have coming up, I think we have 14, 15 flutes signed up. That ought to be interesting.
Wow.
For one session.
Yeah.
We'll see who actually gets there. So we have that, and then you can, if you play violin, you can choose to play first or second, wherever you feel comfortable. And then we have, this year I'm trying to think here. I believe we have 5 sessions this year. Yeah, 5 different sessions this year.
Yeah.
Different conductors. And then in a normal year, we would also have a festival finale concert where we would, and this is where it gets a little difficult because for strings, if you want to try it, you can try it. You're in the hopper. If you're a wind or brass player, we have auditions for principals for all the different sections, and then we assign people to the different pieces that we're doing depending upon the difficulty.
Yeah, because it's harder because it's in most of well, actually probably in all orchestral works, most of the wind brass parts are that the composer intend to have one on a part.
Correct.
So you can't really have if that year you have 3 tuba players want to play, you can't really have. It doesn't make any sense to have all three play the same part at the same time. So
yes, nothing personal, Kevin. If we had three tubas, I don't think the rest of us. So.
no, I think that the reading sessions is interesting because it's not intended to be a performance. There's a performance of those pieces at the end. So I guess things would be a little bit more flexible in terms of
and it's very relaxed. It's very laid back, especially if you have somebody that maybe has trouble when they see a new piece, playing a new piece that they haven't played before, and we call that sight reading. It's a very, just come in and try. Just get your feet wet.
Yeah.
Just come in and try it. It's a good place for students that are maybe youth that want to play in a youth symphony that when they audition, they have to sight read or play something they haven't seen before. It's a good chance to come in and try those skills.
Yeah.
And to do it in a very welcoming environment.
And for community orchestra players, amateur players, sometimes they really don't get to do the big orchestral stuff. And this is where, the reading sessions can, they can come in and play those, those pieces. Like some of the Respighi stuff, you don't really actually get to do it that much.
Oh, yeah. Respighi.
Some of the big production stuff,
Yeah.
Heck, even the Mahler stuff, some of those, which will probably lead us into the next thing. Now, the Mahler stuff, a lot of times, big production, huge orchestra.
Yes.
Even like Symphony No. 8, like Symphony of 1,000. Very, very intimidating stuff, right? So
it can be.
Yeah. So I think one of my thinking is, if somebody who is a casual classical music lover, or even not, it's somebody who has really not too much interest in classical music, when they think of Mahler, right away they will think of something like, whoa, that's like 2 CDs worth of music right here. Look at this. Look at this Deutsche Grammophon, Leonard Bernstein, Symphony No. 3. Wow, 2 CDs. Very I would say, Mahler can be very intimidating in
yes,
a way.
He can be. Yes, he can be.
Now,
but he's not. When you first approach it, it's like, oh my gosh, this is just so overwhelming. It's like, oh, I could never do that. And see, I get to this when the students come in, and especially if it's their first time. And if they haven't done a lot of orchestral playing, even if they have, they're like, oh, I can't do that. And
I can't even listen to it.
Yeah, you have some adults who even have that attitude or have that feeling that there's no way. But as you get in and you learn a little bit more about it, because see, it's not just educating the public, Kevin, it's also educating the players.
Absolutely.
And as you listen to it and you work on it, you go, hey, this kind of sounds like folk music. So you discover that Mahler was not this highfalutin, highbrow person that was writing all these grandiose ideas, although they were pretty grandiose. They were pretty big.
Yeah, wearing costumes when he, goes to bed or something like that. Yeah, it's not that.
I think that's Wagner. Anyway, but he took a lot of the things that were around him. He loved nature. He loved the Alps. And he took what he saw and what he heard, and he tried to recreate that in his music.
Yeah.
And if you look at it, it really is not so much for the highfalutin upper class as it is for the common person. And I also think, he saw the Alps as being big and powerful and grand, and he tried really hard to put that into his music, which in this case means a lot of brass.
Yeah.
Means a lot of string players, means these lush sounds that are just so, oh my gosh. It can be like the opening that you played at the beginning of this, but before you introduced yourself and myself. Big and dramatic, and just makes you stop in your tracks.
Yeah.
because it's just attention grabbing, but it's also small and intimate and like two people having a conversation, or a husband and a wife, or two lovers, or two people,
Kindred spirits.
two kindred spirits
Yeah.
who are sharing an emotion. It can pull out of you just it's not this big, grandiose thing. It's big and it's small.
Yeah, it's like we go on with this boredom with classical music thing. The more I say this, the more it's like, why are we doing this? Because this is a losing proposition, right? But
I don't think so. I don't think so. I don't. It's an opportunity to educate.
Yeah, what I'm trying to say is, for something like a Mahler piece, that inherently there's not really a problem, but there's a property that make it hard to, in a way, promote. Is, well, the length of it is, one element, right? 2 CDs,
Yes.
right? It's very
Yeah.
intimidating.
Oh, yeah.
2 CDs, and the kids are like, what are CDs? Well, they know what CDs are, but and the other thing, of course, is if you very in a very general way, if you want me to describe Mahler's music, seems to me it's very rhapsodic, as in it just instead of having a really fixed structure that you expect certain things to happen after this, it just go. It's like a very free poem that will just go wherever it wants to go, wherever it needs to go.
Yes.
Not even wherever it needs to go, wherever Mahler wants to go. So now, what you just talked about, right? What you just described, how Mahler music, it's one way to enjoy Mahler music. But somebody need to talk. Somebody need to talk about that before you want somebody to approach Mahler's music. It does need a little bit of explaining.
Yeah,
Before,
it does.
or
It
we
does.
just go into
does.
it and just sit there for 45 minutes without knowing what's going on. So I think that's maybe part of the problem with promoting classical music. And I think what the Mahler Festival is doing is wonderful, because it does give the opportunity for people to for everybody to try to understand this in a very down to earth kind of way.
Yes.
Because
yes.
a lot of times, classical music seems to be written by these people who have nothing to do with us, from 200 or 300 years ago. And what just popped into my head when you were talking is Mahler actually have been to the United States, right? Maybe several times. And
I think so.
yeah, he's actually it's not that it's 100 years. He lived about 100 years ago. It's not that far off. And he has actually been to the United States.
Yes.
And walk on the
yes.
same streets as as many of us today. So it's actually not this far remote thing that has nothing to do. So the connection that we can make between this composer and us today, it can be done. Indeed, it can be
Yes.
done. And once that is done, well, then a lot of communication will start to happen between the music and the listener, right? Am I wrong to say that?
Oh no! I don't think that you're wrong to say that at all.
Yeah, and
and then also, what people also need to realize, it's one thing to listen to music on a CD or listen to an MP3 or an MP4. Let's be
iPod.
up to date here, of a piece. You'll get different interpretations. But also, when you're in that room or you're in that performance venue, and this is where concerts are different than watching a video or watching a DVD.
yes,
Is you experience, there's a human connection.
yeah,
There's energy. The performers get energy from the audience, and they get that back from us.
yeah. I mean, this
And
may sound
it-
crazy and Star Trek-ish to say, but the sound wave hit
Yeah.
you a little bit differently.
Yes.
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 Whenever there's a live thing going on, or you're just listening to a recording with a headphone. So
Yeah. Yes.
Hey,
It's a whole different thing. And I mean, like even with the students, for example, because when you have young students, you have to have their parents
yeah.
because most of them don't drive yet. Um,
Not as far as we know. As far as we know.
The ones I can speak about weren't driving yet. They weren't old enough to drive.
Yeah.
But and the parents, this was like a whole new genre for the parents.
Yeah.
And to hear the parents talk about their journey because they're in the rehearsal hall, and then they come to the concert, to watch them evolve is so much fun for me because, one of the things I've always said about being a performer is I try to create an atmosphere or an environment, and I bring my listener. It's a journey, and I bring my listener with me.
Yeah.
And when you go to a concert hall, you get to. It's not. Yes, it's a performance, but you're part of it.
Yeah. The journey thing is very important.
It's very important, and you can leave all your troubles outside the door, and whatever physical limitations you may have, or financial, whatever. When you shut the door, the lights come down in the audience, the lights come up on the stage, and the music starts. It's a world. It doesn't matter if you speak English naturally, or if that's your first language, or you speak Russian or Mandarin, or whatever. It's something that we can. It transcends all of that.
Yeah.
And we're in it together. And so, if you've never gone to a classical concert and you've just listened to the recordings, it can be ho hum. I can't relate to that. But if you actually go to the performance, especially a Mahler one, especially Northwest Mahler Festival, I can guarantee you it's the ride of your life.
Well, unless you double park your car, so in that case you better go out there right away.
Pay for parking.
All right. Anyway, so that's okay. Now, can you believe this? We just hit the half-hour mark. We have been talking for half an hour, right? So now I think we should kind of wrap this up a little bit. But before we do, I want to talk about with you one more topic here, because the last time when we talked to Gary Cannon, he's the musical director of his of 3 groups, and we chatted a little bit about programming. We chat a bit about programming. How do you, it's a lot of skills that goes on there, right? Programming. How do you program music that everybody? Well, the business side of it really is how do you program, stuff that people would pay money to see. And now so let's talk a little bit about programming. Now, there is I would say inherent problem. May not be a problem, but the inherent thing is for the Mahler Festival, there is a theme there already, right? So you have to do something Mahler-ish.
Yes,
and,
we do.
You have to. Now, do you guys program have to have a symphony or a big like Kindertotenlieder or something like that? Do you have to have something like that, or is actually there's more freedom in terms of the programming for the once a year for the annual concert?
Well, I think with the title of the festival, it kind of comes with automatic limitations, or let's just say soft boundaries. But the boundaries are there nonetheless.
Okay. So it's probably not acceptable if the annual concert is like first half Stockhausen and there's the second half of Webern. No, you won't. Shouldn't do that.
No.
Okay.
First of all, you want to do something that's going to involve a large group, because you have basically, between 120 to 140 players.
Lots of bodies.
You also have to make sure that the majority of what you program is going to utilize your wonderful brass section that comes with the Mahler Festival.
Yeah.
You want to utilize that. It's easier to program something that will utilize the winds, because that's more traditional and that's done just about all the time. but you want to make sure that you are utilizing a piece, a work, or a series of works that will use your tuba, your bass trombone, your trumpets, your French horns. You gotta have those horns. You just gotta have those horns, and so that's something that you have to consider. There was a year, because generally we've always had a Mahler symphony, or a large Mahler work.
Yeah, and
there
was
a year that we didn't do that, and it was really challenging. And there are people that actually said to us, "But you're the Northwest Mahler Festival. You have to do a Mahler symphony." And we kind of took a little different turn, and we kind of thought about it and went, maybe we don't want to go down that route. If we're doing a series of concerts, then of course, that gives you a little more flexibility. But if you're looking at one festival finale concert or just one concert, then you need to try to make sure that Mahler is the focal point.
Yeah.
And then finding works that accompany that. You were asking me, what's the process? Well, it starts with the conductor, with the principal conductor, whoever you are having that year.
Yeah.
And of course, we suggest that they look at our history to see what works we have done, things like that. And the conductor can let us know, what Mahler symphony they would like to do, and then we have to look at the cycle and see where it fits into our cycle in terms of how long it's been since we've done that.
Okay.
Then the conductor, once that's been decided, and the conductor has the idea, then of course it's presented back to the board of directors, and it's a joint decision on that.
Yeah.
Then the conductor comes up with ideas of other works to open the concert and something to go into the middle before. Generally, the second half is the Mahler symphony. There's the Mahler work. Something that will go with that, and then this is where you get to see the different personalities of the conductor.
Yeah.
Their tendencies, and then this is kind of where, because the board is for the most part made up of people that play in the festival. You've got I believe right now we have on our board, we have 2 string players, 3 string players, pardon me. We have 2 wind players, and a brass player and a conductor now on the board. And so you get to see each person's tendencies that start to come out.
Oh, yeah. Brass players. The third would be nice.
Yeah,
the fifth would be nice.
Yeah. And it's just coming up with something that maybe that we could introduce a new composer, maybe that wasn't as well known, that fits our criteria in terms of what we are to the audience. So you want something that is known, and maybe you want to introduce something a little different.
Yeah.
For example, last year we did Mahler 3. That was our focal point, and everything that we planned went around the fact that we had Mahler 3 and the size of Mahler 3. And our principal conductor was Alexander Pryor, and who's also a composer. And so we brought in a piece by a composer that most Westerners do not know, named George Sviridov, and we did his piece called Snowstorm. Wow. Gorgeous work. If you ever follow the Olympics and ice skating or ice dancing, you've heard parts of this piece because the Russian skaters love to skate to it.
Wow.
It's just, there's parts of it that are just gorgeous. And it was new for most of our orchestra and for a great deal of our audience. Now, for our parts of our potential audience that maybe have never thought of us before, this was great for the Slavic community, because here's something that for many of them who immigrated to the United States remember this from their childhood.
Wow.
And so it was like, I would mention the name of the piece and the Russian title of the piece, and you'd see a smile.
Wow. That's great.
So some people that maybe never would come to one of our concerts, their curiosity was kind of piqued a little bit.
Yeah, I mean,
so that was kind of neat.
You're basically
then,
you're basically using the programming to do outreach for
Yeah,
the
yes,
group
using
and
for
then the
outreach,
and the music
yes.
itself. Yeah, that's
Yes.
awesome.
And then our conductor, as I said, who also is an award-winning composer, we had to find a short piece, and that was the challenge, was finding something short that would utilize as many players as possible and still not be another 40 minutes long.
Yeah.
Because Snowstorm is about 27 minutes long.
Wow.
Okay. And so he had written a piece that he composed quite a bit of here in Seattle when he first came to the United States, called Horizons. And it utilizes 4 soloists and a rather large orchestra, and that's what he says.
Yeah.
And
It
in fact,
fits right in with the
fits right
festival.
in.
Yeah.
And in fact, he doesn't have one wind player on a part. He actually doubles.
Wow. Okay.
So it was perfect for us.
Works perfectly.
So for us, we had the very unique position of doing the North American or premiere of his piece, because it only had been done one other time in England.
Yeah.
So he wrote a great deal of it here in Seattle, and he composed the rest in London. It premiered in London, and we got to do the North American premiere here in Seattle.
Yeah.
And
That's
so
fabulous.
that was very special. And then we also got to utilize young people again, because Alex and I talked about this, and we decided that we wanted to use young people as the soloists on the piece, which is what he did when he originally wrote it.
Yeah.
And so all except for the cellist, all were from the greater Puget Sound area. And we, started the journey of finding the soloists for Horizons, and came up with Julie Chang, who's from Auburn, who was co-concert master Tacoma Youth Symphony. We wound up with Jeffrey Lee from Redmond, who was co-concert master Seattle Youth Symphony. Rosa Lee, who I've known since she was 10 years old, amazing pianist, who had just gotten her master's from Juilliard.
Wow.
We utilized her, and then we also used Ryan Gajek,
Yeah.
who is a friend of Alex's, who's from British Columbia. Amazing cellist. And so here we found a piece, right size, utilize our big orchestra, work with our mission statement of our festival by utilizing young soloists. Our soloists were between the ages of 15 and a half and 18. 15 and a half and 22, because Rosa had just turned 22, I believe.
Yeah.
And it just created this magical feeling, and we did it at Benaroya, and that's a case where you can take the problem of how do I find programming and make it work for this, and utilize the mission statement, do outreach with that, educate the audience about a new composer, and still get them to come in and listen to Mahler.
So it's actually a little bit more flexible than you have to do at Mahler Symphony, right?
Yes, but we do really try very hard to make sure there's a Mahler Symphony.
Well, but then the problem is there's only 9.5 Mahler symphonies, right? There was 10, but my joke is there's 9.5. So
there's 9. Yeah.
Well,
and then also you forget you're forgetting that there's also the Northwest Mahler Festival Chorus.
Well, yeah, that's true. That's true. Now, do you have a separate conductors for that, or you probably during rehearsal you probably have somebody else in charge of the rehearsal other than the main conductor of the whole operation, right?
This is where we're a little bit different. We actually tried that one time, and it wasn't quite as successful as it normally is. We don't start rehearsing until our principal conductor arrives.
Yeah.
So in terms of the chorus, yes, we have a chorus master, and they work with them prior to the arrival of the conductor, because there's separate issues and challenges of working with the chorus. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
And because you have to utilize pronunciation and all that.
Whole another bucket of worms.
Whole another bucket of how about jar of cookies? How's that?
Okay, fine.
Instead of
fine,
bucket of worms.
fine.
I know. I'm a singer. You can't do that.
Okay, wait, I'm sorry. So now, Wendy, we're quickly hitting the. Can you believe this? This is like 45 minutes
Wow.
of material. And I just want to ask you a couple of things. Maybe, because working with, we talk a little bit about this with Gary. And probably we also mentioned that somewhere in the previous shows, but working with living composer is actually a very wonderful thing because you get feedback right away. You can, you can change. You can't talk to Bach unless, under very special circumstances, right? You can't talk to Beethoven. But, if there's a living composer that is around and he or she is at the rehearsals and you can talk about, different arrangements here and there, dynamic marking here, pin here and there, that kind of stuff. That will be interesting. Now let's save that for a later show because I'm always very interested in working with living, breathing. That's important. Living, breathing composers, very important. So let's save that for a later show. And also, next time you're on, hopefully we can make some arrangement into having you as the main show, part of the main show. But we can't. We have to do a short segment again. And we can talk a little bit about the operation, the actual, when the festival is happening, the day-to-day operation of how to put a festival like this together. Because I don't think that's kind of stuff, the behind-the-scenes stuff, is not talked enough. Even the, how to fill out paper. Well, let's not bore everybody with that. But you know what I'm saying, though, right?
Yeah, I do.
So let's.
It's one thing. I will say this because for many years I was a volunteer with the festival.
Yeah.
Anybody who knows me knows I'm the person that'll get up and go, what can I do to help? And I may not even ask. I'll just start seeing there's a need and I start doing it. And then to be on that, to truly be on the inner circle. And then I never dreamt I would be president of this organization. I just wanted to help. And I, as a music teacher, was very grateful that they were providing this wonderful opportunity for my students.
Yeah.
And I always talk about giving back. Give back. If somebody helps you, then you should help them. Mm-hmm. Give back to the community. Give back. Help provide an opportunity for others. And that was how I got involved.
Yeah, because guess what? This music thing actually belongs to everyone.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
Well, let's save all that for future shows. And thanks again for being
welcome.
here today, Wendy. And Wendy is going to be one of our regular panelists, and you'll probably hear her again soon. So see you later, Wendy.